You are listening to the recording of the panel discussion on June 12, 2014, titled The Impact of Decision Modeling for Business and IT, brought to you by Knowledge Partners International, the thought leader in the field of business process, decision, and change management. I am Michael Gross, and I will be your host today and will introduce you to our moderator. Larry Goldberg is Managing Partner of Knowledge Partners International and Chief Evangelist of the Decision Model. He has over 40 years of experience in building technology-based companies on 3 continents, and in which the focus was rules-based technologies and applications. Commercial applications in which he played a primary architectural role include such diverse domains as healthcare, supply chain, and property and casualty insurance. Larry is co-author of The Decision Model, a business logic framework linking business and technology, published by Taylor & Francis in 2009. He's also co-editor of the Business Rule Revolution, Running the Business the Right Way, which was published in 2007. Larry joins Barbara von Halle, his business partner at KPI, in writing the monthly business decision management column in www.tdan.com and in www.modernanalyst.com. Many of you may have seen Larry presenting at one of the many IIBA or brainstorm events or listened to his webinars about decision modeling. Today he will be our moderator for a very interesting panel whose participants are from a wide array of industries, joining us from different locations, including almost all time zones in the US and Hong Kong.
And thank you for joining us. We're very excited. We have a very distinguished panel, and it's my honor and pleasure to introduce them. And I think I can rate them all as friends of mine and people who for whom I have the highest respect. So we're going to start with Alan Holstinsky, who is Senior Vice President of Strategic Initiatives, Gold Taylor Mortgage. Dr. Nick Ellingworth, Strategic Architect with SAP, FSI Consulting in EMEA. Cheryl Mascaro, who's the Enterprise Architect for Strategy, Architecture, and Innovation at Intel. And Todd Schmidt, Executive Director, CBB Architecture at JP Morgan Chase. And what the format is, we're going to give you a brief bio for each of our panelists, and then one by one I'm going to ask our panelists an introductory question. And then from there we're going to move to an open panel where I'm going to throw out a question and see who from the panel wishes to catch the answer. So without further ado, we're going to move on to Todd Schmidt. So Todd is an executive director with consumer and business banking and shared services of JP Morgan Chase. He's had 27 years of experience in information technology, and he really has the job of architectural oversight in the bank's branch and retail channel systems and core customer and deposit systems. So Todd has got a world of experience behind him. And I want to throw the first question to Todd, and the question I would ask you, Todd, is from an enterprise architecture perspective, where does decision modeling fit in? Over to you, Todd.
About this question in 2 main areas. One is improved control, so reducing or mitigating risk because we have more control over over the logic in our software. And the other one is increased productivity. And because all of our decisions and logic become more transparent, and because they're formalized and can be reused, we really get greater productivity as well. And if you think about those 2 things together, you get improved control, but at the same time you get increased productivity. It's really a great situation, because you might think that increasing controls would result in a decrease in productivity or result in higher costs to produce software. But if we can do both those things together, it's a great combination. So that's, I think, the main, if I were to summarize it, that's our main advantage from an architectural perspective.
So Todd, when you talk about increased productivity, are we talking? What are we talking about? 10%, an order of magnitude? I mean, what does it really translate to? if you can give us some sense.
Yeah. The way because we're fairly early into it and I don't have a lot of really good hard metrics across a lot of time, I can sort of anecdotally respond to that and say that when I talk to the team, they talk about being able to make a change in a matter of an hour. Talk with the business, adjust the decision model, export it out to the code in the course of an hour for a basic logic change. Now that would be, if you think about the traditional world of programming, that a change like that might take, you know, a day or two. So for a simple example like that, you know, we're probably talking about at least an 8-fold increase in productivity.
Oh, that's meaningful. Good, thanks, Todd. I appreciate that. And I'm going to move on to Cheryl. So Cheryl is an old friend of mine. She's also the enterprise architect, strategy, architecture, and innovation at Intel. She's had 30 years of experience, of which 22 years have been with Intel. And she's a member of Intel's strategic enterprise architecture team, focused on intelligent business process management, business decision management, and defining and optimizing Intel's value chain. So for Cheryl, I have this question. So Cheryl, what role does decision modeling play in capturing requirements? And welcome to the web.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. So this is what we find, is that we have learned that about 80% of the changes that come back from the businesses to IT to make changes to existing applications really are related to our business decisions. They're not really related to our process flows. So one of the things that we're doing in our requirements is that we really want to make sure that we are designing for change right up front. We want to know where the change is going to be. One of the things that we've changed about our defining the early stages as a part of the business process definition, we've separated that design of the process from the decision. We, even at an architectural level, we start defining policies right along with our business architecture and our application architecture and our technology architecture. So I think that what we're trying to do is find those changes, not only in decisions, but in other areas as well, but early on in the requirements phase.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Cheryl. Appreciate that. And now I'm going to move on to Dr. Nick Ellingworth. So Nick, again, a good friend of mine and the strategic architect with SAP, FSI, which is Financial Consulting in EMEA. Hey, Nick. Good morning.
Hi. Hi. Good morning. So yes, financial services industries indeed. Yeah. So banking, core banking, insurance as well.
Right. And this is very late at night for you because you're talking to us from Hong Kong. Is that correct?
I am indeed. Yes. But it's all in the day's work, isn't it?
So Nick, like our other panelists, have got many years of experience in the field of IT. And he's covered banking architectures in core banking, finance, risk domains, and in retail, corporate, and central banks. In fact, there's very little in banking that Nick doesn't know about in terms of architecture. And I've had the privilege of listening to him at many fora, and I've actually stood on the stage with him in several of them. And he has been the leading SAP architect in several major core banking implementations in Europe and the Middle East. He's one of the authors of the standard SAP methodology for banking implementations, ASAP. I think it's ASAP 8 by now, right, for FSI?
Indeed, yes.
And so Nick, and you were instrumental in introducing the decision model into SAP. So I'm going to ask Nick this question. Why did you introduce decision modeling into SAP's methodology, and what is its role? Over to you, Nick.
Great. Well, Larry, thank you very much for that generous introduction. So the question, of course, has two parts. So why did we introduce this, and what's the role? So I'll take that question in two parts, if I may. So first of all, why did we introduce the decision model? So some 5 or 6 years ago, when we were really pushing to increase our had a number of core banking implementations going on, and we were struggling in the area of methodology. So we made a very, very intense effort to construct a really watertight and very clearly constructed and logical methodology, which would allow us to guide us in our core banking implementations in particular, and through the complexities which we had there. And of course, the main complexities that we had to deal with, from an architecture perspective, you could say we had complexities around data, had complexities around process, and complexities around logic and business rules. And the main focus we had when we were constructing the methodology initially was really focused on the two areas of data and the process. So in terms of data, we were, of course, introducing service-oriented architecture, services, standard services, and so on. So we made a very, very intense effort to get data sorted out in our landscape. And process, as far as process was concerned, again there was a huge emphasis on process modeling and understanding processes, and making sure that we had modeled the processes correctly from a business perspective and also from an IT perspective. And when we had finished the first iteration of the methodology, a number of us had been, this was ASAP 7, as you rightly said, the current version of course is ASAP 8. ASAP 7, when we finished that in 2010 or thereabouts, a number of us sat down and reflected, and we realised that we had really failed in the area of business rules. So those of us, the reason we failed was we had enormously complex free text rules with lots of data, lots of content, but they were hard to maintain. You couldn't read them top down, and we really needed to find a better approach. And a number of us started looking around for a better approach, and eventually we found your book, Larry, your book on the decision model, and it was strikingly obvious that the complexity, the problems which were described in your book were the same problems that we had, and therefore that was why we looked to solve the problem of logic and of requirements and logic definition through the decision model, which we went on to do. So that was the motivation for introducing the decision model for SAP. In terms of the role, I really see the role of the decision model in three specific areas. That's to say, it's around requirements gathering, it's simplifying requirements gathering, it's optimizing requirements gathering. The second one is driving the gap analysis between standard business rules which we have in SAP and the requirements, the pure system agnostic requirements which we gather from the business. So that's the second part. And the third part, which is crucially important from a point of view of efficiency, is testing. That's to say, once we have pure business logic and in decision, test cases with a completeness which we could not dream of before. So those are really the roles which we have. So overall, I would say the role of the decision model, the purpose of introducing the decision model, is really to the cost benefits in terms of quantitative benefits, the reductions in time, the reductions in rework, and also qualitative benefits which we get from enhanced relationships with the clients.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nick. That was a fantastic overview, and I appreciate it. Next I want to introduce again a friend of mine, and somebody I'm proud to be able to call a friend, and that's Alan Hostinsky of Cole Taylor Mortgage. Alan also a lot of experience in technology, 23 years, but primarily in the mortgage industry. He was the founder and CEO of Westpol Inc., a company that specialized in IT strategies and solutions, and was included in Mortgage Technology Magazine's Top 100 Vendors list in 2003 and 2004. And with Westpol, Alan drove the vision, design, implementation of Interface MOA system, the MOAI system, the first web-based application for wholesale lending. Before joining Cole Taylor Mortgage, Alan was SVP Web Technology and Strategy for City Mortgage. In his current role at Cole Taylor Mortgage, Alan is responsible for setting and advancing technology strategy. He's established a business process engineering team to execute key components of that strategy, including decision modeling. And I've been present at several of Alan's presentations and webinars, and he's probably he has some of the best vision I've seen around the implementation of decision modeling because of his hard practical experience and matching that experience to strategy. So for Alan, firstly, Alan, welcome to our webinar.
Thank you very much for having me.
Can you share the lessons you learned from the recent implementation of a business decision management system in your organization?
Sure. It's been a pretty fascinating experience. First of all, as a little background, we're not a very large company. We have a software development team here of roughly 15 people, including developers, business analysts, and QA. And we established our business process engineering team to handle the decision modeling. We're using an environment, a modeling tool that can export those the rules that come out of the decision modeling with business decisions, and we happen to be using it with JBoss Drools. The tool can also export to Java, so we have some options there. But what was really interesting to me was watching the dynamics within the organization, because when we established this business process engineering team and started looking at business decisions separate from the rest of the application, we had people who, on the business process engineering team, started gathering requirements, essentially, so they were acting as business analysts. And then in as much as when we modeled those and exported them to the rule engine, they were also essentially, by creating a decision model that was executable, they were also acting as developers. However, these are not people who have any training as business analysts or developers per se, and aren't as familiar with the software development lifecycle. So what we found was there was some confusion between the two teams that we had to address to start to figure out where are the boundaries now? How do the business analysts work with the decision modelers, and how do the developers work with those? And what do we implement within a decision model as opposed to in the code that we've got? And architecturally speaking, this is one of the great benefits for me of having a rule engine separate and having decision modeling drive that, is that in system architecture, you generally want loose coupling. You're always looking for ways to divide up the responsibilities of your system so you can change one without affecting the others inordinately. But that is a really important concept, and it can be hard to figure out where the boundaries are and what will you put in one system subcomponent versus another. And sometimes your decisions have to be on where to place that code have to be driven by practical concerns like resource availability. So that's a potential pitfall as well. So all these dynamics and changes to how we have to work within our software development lifecycle has really been a good lesson.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan. I really appreciate that. And now I'm going to throw out a question to our panel as a whole, and we'll see who catches it. So I want to talk about the tangible and intangible benefits that you believe decision modeling has for business and IT.
I mean, I think it's clear in terms of the tangible benefits, the requirements gathering, the simplification of requirements gathering, and therefore the cost savings around requirements gathering. So you can measure the time which is saved by having a very clear definition of business logic, avoiding the cycles of rework which are associated with less structured approaches. It's easy to quantify the benefits you have around testing. Anyone who's how difficult it can be manually to take the decisions, or the business rules which are defined during requirements gathering and during design and redefine build phases, and then put those into test cases manually to try and work out what all the combinations of data are and so on. So if you have a decision model, and in particular if you have access to an instance of Statements decisions, so you can generate test cases, you can do sampling, it's clear that there are very clearly quantifiable benefits in those areas. The intangible benefits are absolutely critical as well. I mean, when I was working at one of the banks in Belgium on a corporate banking implementation a year or more ago, about a year and a half ago, I introduced the decision model as the standard SAP means for defining business rules and for defining requirements. And I didn't push it very hard with the bank. I was very surprised one day when I was just sitting at my desk to find that the chief business architect came over to my desk and said, could I come to a meeting with the business leadership? When I got there, they announced that they decided to adopt the decision model as the standard requirements gathering approach for not only for the SAP project, program which I was working on, but also 3 other projects concerned with payments engines and other core banking technologies. And I think that's a very nice illustration of the fact that if you introduce decision model, because of its simplicity, because it's so intuitive, because it's so usable, actually it enhances your status within the organization, because you gain credibility by virtue of introducing such a great approach. So tangible, yes, there are lots of cost benefits. I think some of the other speakers have spoken about that. But let's not forget the intangible benefits of really communication and credibility that the decision model brings to you.
Yes, this is Alan speaking. To build on that a bit, one of the, I guess on the tangible side, the quality of what we deliver, we're seeing that goes up. And I think that comes from a couple of sources. Generally in software, when software development goes bad, many studies have shown that often that's a gap in the requirements. And even if you have pretty good requirements gathering in traditional software, there's many layers of translation where you can have a mistranslation. You have the business giving the requirements to BAs or business analysts. The business analysts write them into requirements. Those requirements are then translated over to the developers, and they translate it into code. So if you can reduce those steps as much as possible, you reduce the number of ways in which those requirements can get misconstrued or mistranslated. So what we have with decision modeling is a couple of ways that it helps. One is that it's relatively readable by business people. Some more than others if they're a little more technical or logical in their area of expertise, but it is readable. So right away you have something that they can confirm that what is on the page is correct without that translation into lengthy requirements documents. Second, the fact that in our modeling tool we simply export it to run means that we've taken out that whole area of coding those rules and decisions. So that removes that layer. And then finally, one really interesting thing we found is when our business process engineers do the decision models, they find gaps in the logic that the business has defined. And that's in large part due to the rigor that the decision model brings to the modeling. So you actually can't introduce certain kinds of gaps. You can't complete the model. It doesn't pass the automated tests that we have within our modeling environment if we don't have complete answers. So, and the same goes for certain kinds of collisions in the rules, meaning contradictions within the rules. We have found both and been able to correct our business policy based on that. So those have been key things that are pretty tangible. And I'm a little bit in the same boat as Todd, that we don't necessarily have the metrics in place yet to compare real well before and after, but we do have those anecdotal, that anecdotal evidence. On the intangible side, one thing is that there's the intangible side is brief. By having the business, sometimes in corporate settings, I've often seen where there's a divide between business and IT, and they have this sort of unease with each other. I think the business modeling is a really great bridge, and it drives the business to take more direct responsibility for the way that systems work when we use it in the way we are. There we go. That's it for me, Todd. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's good. I would echo the things that you said, but there's one other intangible I would mention, which is the analysts really enjoy being in this with the decision model, a sort of almost a morale aspect to this, where people really enjoy their work as a result of it.
Yeah, that's actually an intangible I haven't heard before, but it's absolutely true, because as I think of what you just said, I think of some of the people that we've worked with and how they respond as a team to this work, and we always get this kind of rush of enthusiasm, which is great to see amongst the analysts particularly, but we see this rush of enthusiasm because I think that they feel that they're doing something extremely, concrete and measurable, and that really makes a big difference. So I think what you say is absolutely true. So okay, so this question kind of touches on a little bit of what we've asked up to now, and this is this grave question of who really is decision modeling for? Is it for the business, for IT? And this question is not only comes from our audience, but actually it's inspired by ourselves in a way, because one of the puzzles for us is who are we actually talking to? Are we talking to the business, or are we talking to IT? Should we be talking to the business? Should we be talking to IT? And often when the business brings in the decision model, we have a lot of resistance from IT, and sometimes when the IT brings in the decision model, there's a lot of resistance from the business. So who would like to give me some illumination on this puzzle?
This is Todd. I can start. I think some of the others have already talked about it, but I would just first say it's for both, because as people have already stated, you really do need to have this communication between the two in order to get a project done, and it really enables that communication to occur more effectively, more accurately, more quickly. I really think it's for both. Now, in our specific case, we've got it in through IT, and what is starting to happen is organically, as we work these projects, the business people who are on those projects begin to see the value and actually begin to call out, hey, this should really be a business rule when they're in requirements. And so I think eventually, even though we've brought it into IT, I think the business will embrace it, and already is, and it'll spread across both.
Thanks, Todd. Who else wants to add to this question, to the answer?
So this is Cheryl, and one of the things I think is that the decision modeling really is a nice tool to bring both of these together. So I know the question is specifically, is it for business, is it for IT? I think like the others, it's for both, but our experience is that when we bring both teams together to actually do the decision modeling is where we really get some success. And we actually had a use case in Intel where we had a decision around Incoterms, which is an industry standard for export contracts, that people just could not figure out what term they should be using for different contracts. People were, guessing some of the time. So there's a lot of impact financially for the company by doing that. And by using the decision model, we were able to, within just a matter of weeks, be able to take out of the brains, the tribal knowledge of the people in the business and actually get it into a decision model. We had a team working on that for 2 years, just trying to sort out what the logic was, and the decision model allowed us to jointly with business and IT, pull that information out, and we're continuing to use it in many other use cases than just the one we started with.
So Cheryl, in your case, you introduced the model through IT. Is that correct?
We did.
And
well, let me just say we had a good business partner. So I'm not sure how successful we would have been just pushing from an ICT side. You kind of need to find the right business partners, at least in the early stages of this, that are willing to see something from a different perspective. And that was the case that we had in this particular use case.
So is any of the panel, will anybody from the panel responsible for introducing this, the model from a purely business perspective rather than from an IT perspective?
We did introduce the decision model, if you like, from the IT side to the fence. But the interesting thing to notice is that generally it's the business people who have most quickly seen its benefits and have been most quickly become its major advocates. Of course, that absolutely doesn't mean that it doesn't have very far-reaching implications for IT. Of course, it does. I mean, from an IT architecture perspective, if you think about all the focus that there's been over the past 20 years, 20 or 30 years on data, the relational model of data with Ken Todd and IBM in the 80s, and then everything to do with process and service-oriented architecture more recently. The ghost of the feast has always been logic. And, one of the other speakers talked about separation concerns, which we like to see. Within IT architecture, you need to have a separation of the concern of logic from the other concerns. And to my mind, what I see from IT perspective is that the decision model is the first model, the only model that I've seen that really provides a definitive answer to the question, how do you define logic properly from an IT perspective? But of course, because of the clarity of the answer, that means that it's always the business who sees on it, because they, as one of the other speakers said, it's so easy and so intuitive, and it speaks to them so easily that of course they run with it. But I see it as having an IT background and then really speaking to the business very effectively. So it does definitely speak to both.
Thanks. All right, so moving on to the next question we had prepared. So how do decision modeling and process modeling relate in your world? And so I guess everybody on this call have had some experience in modeling in both domains, and how do they relate in your world is the question I would ask. Anybody want to grab that?
Sure, this is Alan. The team that we put together is trained in both decision modeling and process modeling. We felt they were so intimately related in a way that we wanted to make sure that we could do both and make them work together well. So we made sure to do it that way. Some of the similar principles and the benefits of decision modeling are similar to the benefits we get from the process modeling in being able to use a rigorous methodology and to be able to a lesser degree with process modeling, but be able to export those models into executable form or along with that as we are with decision modeling.
In your case, Alan, are you using tools? I know you're using a decision modeling tool. Are you using tools for both domains, and are those tools integrated in any way yet?
They are not integrated per se. We are using a tool, actually one that you suggested, Larry, which was signavio.com for the process modeling. And and you know, that brings to mind, by the way, another benefit to both of these approaches is that they are standards. We're using the BPMN2 standard for process modeling, decision model as a standard for rule modeling, and the portability of those is attractive as well. So down the road, if we decide we want to use different tools, the methodology stands alone, separate from those, and so there's some portability.
And you mentioned the process modeling tool, and the decision modeling tool is what?
That Sapiens decision.
Okay, and so at this point they're not connected, but is that the plan? Is that where you guys are going?
Yes, so that is the plan, and having the same people working on both means that we can sort of, before we've got clear rules for how they should work together, we at least have people who can intuitively start to see where the two interrelate.
Gotcha. Excellent. And I think, Todd, you wanted to have a word there. I heard you.
The question is interesting for us because when we started working with KPI early on, in some of the training sessions, it was clear that there's an important relationship between the process model and the decision model. However, the fact is we just, as an organization, we're not very mature yet in process modeling. So we have focused much more. We are not doing formal process modeling, yet we are getting significant value from the decision models, simply applying them to what I will just call internal IT processes. So to be more specific, as an example, one of the main decision modeling is in our account opening process. That process really begins through a request from a system, a user sitting at a desktop and sending an account requesting. It's taken and processed by technology on the back end through a series of steps, which you could call a process, but the user side they just see as a request and a response. But we're already seeing advantages, even just applying it there. So I think there's a lot more untapped potential in the future as we mature our capability to expand it and really get some business process improvement beyond what we're seeing today.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. And Cheryl, I see that from your title, and I know from your organization that you really own the process side of the business. So do you find that that the two are related, and do you use them in a related fashion?
We use them together in a related fashion in certain areas. So, Intel's a very large company, and so the standardization of tools is possible to certain levels, but oftentimes for the entire corporation, we can't go there. So in the areas that we are using this, we do integrate the modeling and the process modeling and the decision modeling. We do not have an integrated set of tools at this time.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. So let me go to the next question and just make the remark that where we see people integrating their process and decision tools, we see probably the highest level of maturity and the highest level of value to the organization. I'm going to return to that theme in just a minute. I've got a question before I do return to that theme, and that question is I want to talk about this question of the importance of glossary management and decision modeling, and I'd open that to whoever wants to talk about it, who've had experience in implementing the glossary with their models and their experience of the value of that modeling.
Well, I'll say just something real briefly. This is Todd again. It's absolutely critical from our perspective because we've got a heavy focus right now on controls and regulations, and we need to really make sure that our data definitions are consistent throughout our environment, throughout our ecosystem. So we've put a real strong importance on making sure that managing the glossary is absolutely coordinated with any other data definitions that go through our environment. There's a team around that, and it's working quite well.
And in your case, Todd, since your decisions are automated directly into code, your glossary really plays the key role in being able to make that automated generation of code. Is that not correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that's another reason it is critical. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you actually make that happen? Do you have like a glossary administrator and a data administrator, or do you have one administrator? How do you enforce that?
Yeah, we have an administrator who manages the glossary for our decision models, and that person is working day to day, has regular contact with the data administrator or the data architecture team. And so there's some of it relies on passing, at this point, passing some spreadsheets back and forth. So ultimately we'd like to even get that more automated. But the enforcement is through day-to-day practices and governance practices and meetings that make sure that we're abiding by those standards.
Yeah, and is that governance working? In other words, is this a smooth process, or do you hit? I mean, does your code get generated automatically without interference at this point? Is it working?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's working. I would probably be naive to say there's never a hiccup here and there, but from everything I've heard from the team, by and large, that works quite well. Yeah.
And so I'm interested from Alan. Alan, since you guys have these tools and you've automated a lot of your code generation, what's your experience in terms of the use of the glossary, and how well automated is that?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Todd said there. It is really critical, and one of the aspects that is so important, besides just having a glossary and making sure our people are using, on the business side in IT, are using words the same way to mean the same things. It's also closely tied to our data architecture, and is important for overall system integration, to make it easier to make all of our systems talk to each other, to have a consistent vocabulary. We've created a canonical data model, so we translate every system's view of the world to and from the canonical model, and that makes, to make it easier, make it more consistent in the way we integrate our systems.
Excellent. All right, thanks very much. So I will move on to my favorite question. So my question is for all of you. I'd like all of your organizations are on a journey towards decision management. And that's somewhat different to decision modeling, I guess. And I would define decision management as being able to use your decisions in a strategic way, in a way to influence and manage your business. So the question is, how mature is your organization in using decision management as a strategic tool? Nick, where are you in this journey?
I have to admit we're at a fairly early stage. We have a number of different decision management tools within SAP, and I think the SAP business goes much wider on the financial services industries that I'm involved in. There are 25 other industries, oil and gas. I think one of the challenges for us in the banking sector is to take the strategic position which we give to decision modeling within our own sphere, and then really propagate that out and evangelize that to the rest of the organization. Propagation of decision modeling and decision management issues generally is going on at a very senior level in the organization. I hope that, although we're not mature, pretty mature yet, I hope we will rapidly grow in maturity.
Thank you, Nick. That's excellent. And Cheryl, do you want to try this question?
Yes. I would say I'm sitting here looking, Larry, at your business decision maturity model, and I would say that Intel was still, kind of fairly early in this, somewhere between a level 0 and a level 1 in most of the areas. One of the things that which is on the chart, is between unmanaged and visible. One of the things that in IT, however, there may be areas of the business that are, highly managed from a business side, but not necessarily using the decision, modeling method yet. And so I think we have actually a long way to go. I think people are really looking forward to moving this forward. They like the idea of being able to give control to the business groups to manage their their business decisions and roles and be able to change them. So we have a kind of momentum going on with enthusiasm in that area. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl. Appreciate that. And Alan, where are you guys in terms of using decision management as a strategic tool?
Compared to the other panelists, I have the benefit of, I guess, being in the smallest company by far. We started the journey about a year and a half ago, and in that time, on that business decision maturity model, we are probably just shy of level 2. To put it in sort of practical terms, we have seen some direct benefits that are tactical, but certainly support some strategic gains. Part of being able to use it in a strategic way, I think, is getting the mindset of using this that way propagated throughout the organization. And we're definitely starting to see that, where on the business side, people's eyes are lighting up, realizing ways they can use this to improve not just the quality of the systems we're developing, but rather improving the quality of their own work products. Things like when we underwrite loans, that we can have fewer approved loans that shouldn't have been approved, for instance, so that when we try and sell them over to Freddie Mac, for instance, Freddie Mac won't say that they don't like it so much. So I feel like we also have a good deal of momentum, and being young in it still, there's a lot of room to grow.
Thanks very much, Alan. And so now, Todd, you're going to have the last word on this, because this is the last question, and you're going to have the last word on it. So can you respond to how mature you are in terms of using the tool as a strategic tool?
Yeah, we've done some looking at the maturity model, and I think that where the team placed ourselves was between 2 and 3. But I would hesitate to say I think we're maybe at a 2 and kind of hopeful at achieving 3 in the near future. But one of the things we need to do to move our maturity forward is to really establish firmly a center of excellence. So I think that's a key thing. And then really get the business engaged in a bigger way. I think those 2 things will enable us to move up to the next level. But I think we've got a good foothold. I think we're using it almost more tactically right now, and so I don't feel like we're really strategic yet, but I think we're on our way.
I'd like to thank everybody for attending. It's been wonderful to have this incredible panel with us. We did have 2 additional questions that I'm going to skip, and I'm going to hand back to close us off. I'm going to hand us back to Michael. Michael, do you want to take us away?
Thank you, Larry. Thank you for the participants of our panel. It was very insightful. We had some technical difficulties for which we want to apologize, but I think content over matter. It was very helpful also for people that hear it the first time, and I hope we spurred some interest in decision modeling. If you are interested in learning more, we have a webinar series going on every second Thursday in a month at the same time, 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. The next topic that we are covering is, why do I still need a business decision management system? I already have a business rules management system. So that will be an interesting topic. This will be a standard webinar, not a panel discussion. And if you are interested in learning how to decision model, there is a Decision Model Essentials online class that we are offering also every month once. It's 3 days, 3 half days from 9:30 a.m. to 12:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. That gives you enough time to follow up with your tasks that you have in your job. And you have the advantage to participate online. It's instructor-led. So you have a possibility to interact with the instructor and earn 9 IIB PUs or CDUs depending on how you want to use them. Next training class is July 15, and we hope we see you very soon at one of our next webinars or other events that we are hosting. Again, thank you, Larry, for moderating. Thank you, panel, and thank you to the audience. With this, we conclude the presentation for today.